Which Big 12 football program has been the best since the 2000s? Is it a newcomer like Utah, or is it someone who's been around for little bit, like Oklahoma State? That's what we're going to discuss on today's Locked On Utes and Locked On Oklahoma State crossover.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes and Locked On Oklahoma State your first listen every single day. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined on today's show by the host of Locked On Oklahoma State, Cody Stovall. Once again, thank you for making our shows your first listen every day. We're available on all social media podcasts and wherever you get go to YouTube as well. Wherever you want to go, you can find our shows. On today's show, we are going to talk about how well set up these teams are for the future and if they could even collide in the Big 12 title game. But first, I want to start with a list the Athletic put out that recap the top 25 football programs of the 2000s. Both Utah and Oklahoma State were in this, and they were two schools apart. Utah 23, Oklahoma State 22. They were not as high as TCU. To answer the own question that I posed, Cody, I'm okay with Utah not being at the top when you look at the fact that they made the transition from, work their way up to a P4 at the time, P5 conference. I'm okay that Utah's not at the top. I think Utah belongs in the top 25. We can talk about them versus Oklahoma State in a moment. I'm good with TCU being the highest ranked team, the only Big 12 team current Big 12 team inside the top 20. How did you react to the list?
I'm okay with it, right? TCU has been in the Big 12 a little bit longer, and they were able to ride some instant success with LaDainian Tomlinson and some of those pretty epic ball clubs. And then they recently did represent the Big 12 in a national championship, taking down Michigan, which unfortunately nobody remembers because of what happened in the national title game. But from a recency bias standpoint, it makes sense. And even historically speaking, since their entrance to the Big 12, I can see that. I feel like there's definitely some viability there.
Yeah, that's where it makes sense to me. I mean, when you're looking at TCU too, they have the highest win percentage in this conference at 698. With then it's Oklahoma State, who's actually at 21, and Utah was at 22. Oklahoma State actually at 631. So Utah a slightly higher win percentage. So then the question poses, hey, we give TCU their flowers. They almost made the college football playoff back in the inaugural season in 2015, right? Just barely left out. Already talked about they made a national championship. They've been relevant a lot and towards the forefront. So then I think it becomes interesting for who is the second best team. If you're going to look at the two schools' resumes, let's start with Oklahoma State since they are the higher ranked team here. 631 win percentage. BCS New York Six Bowls is third. And once again, this is Stuart Mandel's list of the Athletic too. Obviously, no national titles. One conference title here, regular season one before the conference championship game was put back in. 13 wins against top 10 teams. 43 wins against top 25 ranked teams. Also top 10 rankings. You got 12% of the time, top 25 rankings 47% of the time, just 4 losing seasons. Compare that to Utah. 661 the win percentage, 4 BCS New York Six bowl games, 4 for you look at the been 4 for Utah, 5 conference titles, some of those coming in those G5 conferences, though, so that weighs into things here. 7 top 10 wins, 25 top 25 wins, 9% of the time ranked inside the top 10. 40% of the time, top 25, 5 losing seasons. When I give you those two resumes, and yes, I know you got orange in your background, obviously, which of those resumes do you find more impressive and why?
I cannot believe you're doing this to me, but I would definitely have to go with Oklahoma State, primarily because of not only the level of competition, but you have to go back to OU. Do I love giving them credit? No, I do not. But people tend to forget that in that stretch that OU was winning 7, 8, 9 straight Big 12 championships, they also played for several national titles and made several BCS bowl games. So people kind of overlook the fact that OU was a juggernaut, not only in college football, but and in the Big 12. We were able to beat Texas 12 out of the last 15 seasons leading up to the Big 12 championship game. So I think taking the university from what it was, which was an afterthought when it came to college football, into somebody that is generally viewed as a top 4, top 5 team in the Big 12, even with OU and Texas firmly positioning in the conference. I just think level of competition for the amount of time and the amount of rebuild, I think I would have to go a little bit towards Oklahoma State. But it's close, right? Their records are almost identical in almost every single category, whether it be wins, losses, bowl games, New Year's Six, all the way down the line. Coach Whittingham and Coach Gundy are obviously the two mainstays in the conference now that Gary Patterson is gone. And that does carry a lot of weight. They also carry a lot of respect. And it'll be interesting to see how this season goes. I feel like we're viewing this from a little bit of a different landscape. I think you guys got, 25-ish transfers. Oklahoma State's operating in the almost 40 category. So we've definitely gone with the entire rebuild. Me and you had this conversation last year about how Oklahoma State and Utah should be able to carry the flag of the Big 12 because of the Mike Gundy and having, staff around for 17, 19, 20 years, and Kyle Whittingham's staff being the exact model in Utah. Well, Mike Gundy fired every single person not named Sean Snyder, it's new. And we brought in almost 40 new transfers, which is something Oklahoma State doesn't typically do. So we're both coming into this season with high expectations, but we're viewing it from two completely different landscapes. And it'll be interesting to see how it ends up.
It absolutely will be. And that's something I want to talk about in the next segment as well, too, is that future success, how these both programs look moving forward. As it relates to this list in and of itself, I have obviously no issue with Oklahoma State being ahead of Utah, but personally, I would be the one to flip this and have Utah slightly above. I think the thing that I look at is I say, hey, 5 conference titles. Yes, 3 of those or 2 of those or including the 3 from the Mountain West and 2, and then you get the 2 from the Pac-12, but that's 2 more conference championships than, yes, a regular season championship, but for the way the format is structured, when you win a conference championship, you win the conference championship game. I would give Utah some credit there. The better win percentage, I think I would lean towards Utah as well, too, and a lot of the other numbers very statistically similar to me, so that's why I would slightly win Utah's. I put a lot of value into those conference championship games. What do you think about that, sir?
I think if the Pac-12 championship was worth a whole lot, they would still be a viable conference.
You doubted us coming into the Pac-12 last year, though. We made you eat that early on in the season. Even though neither of our team ended up being any good.
Even in baseball, with Arizona just winning the postseason championship, I have to admit that the Four Corner schools coming in have been an absolute breathtaking experience thus far, even though Utah fans are purposely rough around the edges and you have to create that internal animosity within the conference. Realistically, I do think that the Big 12 is in a much better position, and we do need the Four Corner schools to continue to be successful. You've heard me say this 1,000 times because I wholeheartedly believe it. I don't care who represents the Big 12 as long as they do something with it. And Arizona State should have won that game, right? Let's just call a spade a spade. They outclassed Texas. They outplayed Texas. They out-hustled Texas that entire second half. So if they didn't leave themselves a massive hole, we're having a different conversation. But nonetheless, even if it's Utah, that is the benefit. Utah does kind of ruffle some people feathers here and there, but there's not an OU in Texas in the conference, right? So I know Utah fans may say some braggadocious things here and there, and they move the needle, but they're not the same as OU and Texas fans. So at least we don't have to worry about that constant nagging and constant pressure for them to get more money and have more viewership and all this other bull honky that Texas never earned, by the way. And Texas was the major culprit. OU was obviously like, yeah, we'll take extra money. Yeah, this is a good idea. But it was always Texas pushing that. And ironically enough, Texas went through that 15 years of saying, I'm back, and they couldn't get out of their own daggone way.
It really is funny, the fact that they spent so much time not being able to break through the Big 12, and now the SEC and Big 10 are trying to do this thing like where they're all high and mighty, and they get in the SEC, and they win the SEC right away. It's like, wait, literally you struggle here, and now you go and win there. I think what you and I absolutely agree on is what's that Star Wars meme where the character's like, I don't care who wins, I just need so-and-so to lose. We feel that way about, we don't care who wins this Big 12. Obviously, we want it. We care. We want it to be our schools. But as long as the SEC and Big 10 end up losing, you and I could be incredibly happy because other things that go on there drive us both insane. But the question then becomes, how set up are Utah and Oklahoma State to be the team that can go and beat the SEC, beat the Big 10 school? That is what we are going to talk about. If 25 years from now, when this list would come out in 2050, are Utah and Oklahoma State going to be on it? That's what we're going to dive into on this Utah Oklahoma Locked On Utes and Locked On Oklahoma State crossover momentarily. But first, today's show is brought to you by our friends at Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account, wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, and your personal CFO, it is absolutely that. Gives you that full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building your wealth. Their surprising insights are massive. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save even more. I also have that all-in-one convenience. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. I also have that easy collaboration. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared accounts and personal ones too. Set goals and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use that code LOCKEDONCollege, all caps, no spaces, at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONCollege, all caps, no spaces, for half off your first year when you visit Monarch Money today. The future of college football is something that is discussed constantly, Cody. And when you look at it from a Utah and Oklahoma State perspective, I am a little concerned about, I don't know if it's going to be Utah and Oklahoma State that are both in the top 3 of this conference. I think what leaves me concerned is college football is becoming an NIL game. And we've seen TCU, Texas Tech. Actually, I think TCU has a better chance than both of our schools to drop out of this. I do not see TCU being in the top 20. Things can change. Right now, I think both Utah and Oklahoma State are set up better for the future, but obviously Texas Tech and BYU are other schools I would say right now in the NIL that have a great chance to be in the top 20 based on just the way the NIL is going. And I know I'm the Utah guy. I'm just calling a spade in terms of what wins right now. NIL, BYU's got a lot of it. But how do you feel? Like I said, for Utah, I think they definitely have a chance, but it's going to be an uphill battle for them to be in the top 25 of this list again. How do you look at Oklahoma State's future, not just even a couple of years down the road, but way down the road?
Well, I think that's one of the most intriguing things about this particular season, right? It's going to be kind of a case study at the end of the year. Is it still reasonable for the old school coaches like the Mike Gundys, like the Kyle Whittinghams, and even you could, I think, throw Bill Belichick into this conversation? Are the old heads still going to be able to adapt to the new game of college football and the way the landscape is adjusting 24/7? But more importantly, I think part of the future is going to be based on this season. We are in a results-driven industry, and you're seeing Arizona State being able to capitalize off of a CFP performance, getting major upticks in recruiting and the transfer portal. I think it's going to take one of us to both do the exact same thing. You have to be able to put yourself at the forefront of viability when it comes to not only NIL, but part of NIL is national exposure. You're not going to get exposure if you're on a 3-win team and it continues to be a problem. So we do have to win. But I think more importantly, this is going to be interesting to see if the old school coaches still have what it takes. And you mentioned NIL. I don't know what Utah is doing, but I can tell you, thanks to the concerts that we've been having in Stillwater, Oklahoma, we've been able to kick our NIL into overdrive. And you're seeing that. We're getting former 5-stars, former consensus 4-stars from SEC schools and Big Ten schools. And several of them started at those SEC and Big Ten schools a couple years back. So we're spending more money than we ever thought physically possible. And we found a little revenue stream with the concerts that are going to start becoming normal. And that is going to kind of fill in the void for some of this NIL money. So you have to continue to be innovative. And thankfully, Mike Gundy and Oklahoma State have done that. Now we have to see it result in wins. We have a top 20 recruiting class. We have a top 30 transfer class. Now it just has to be put on the field and make it make sense to continue to recruit and spend NIL at this level.
It's a similar thing for Utah. You go out and get Devin Dampier, who was a hot commodity in the transfer portal. So you show by getting him, hey, we can play with some of the big boys NIL-wise. Now you have other guys that end up saying, hey, I'm going to stay on your roster and then leave, then hear reports about NIL stuff, and you're like, oh, and some of those go to rivals. And you're like, dang, so how is our NIL? But for Utah, it's still good enough to make it competitive. And I think that is what is key here in that spot too. And I think one thing that's interesting for Utah is I feel good about the succession plan that Utah has post Kyle Whittingham. It seems like, barring something shocking, and last year I said the same thing, and then something shocking happened. Utah sucked, regardless of what you thought of Utah last year. I don't think we thought they were going to miss a bowl game. So that ended up happening. And then you get Kyle Whittingham wanting to come back and not go out on that note. I feel good about Morgan Scalley's succession plan that Utah has. He's been a big part of the recruiting and talent development that Utah has. So I feel like Utah is still, what got Utah to the point they were in was they were recruiting and developing, or I should say developing better than USC and Oregon were. That's why they were able to beat those teams. So because Morgan Scalley, a lot of these coaches are going to stay post Whittingham, I still feel good about Utah's ability to compete and have a chance to stay among the top 25 programs. How do you feel about Oklahoma State's prospects when we do know Mike Gundy almost was out the door this last year?
Yeah, I feel like you did a really good job drawing the correlations there, because Oklahoma State and Utah are the same. We're a university that had to pride ourselves on uncovering the hidden gems and developing 2-stars into NFL level guys. But due to the NIL transfer portal era, we don't really have the same amount of time, right? So this is kind of a battle between Oklahoma State and Utah, just to kind of give a diagram on how things could potentially be in the very near future. You mentioned having Coach Scally already set up is something that Mike Gundy isn't exactly looking at the moment, but he made some moves, naming Todd Grantham the official head coach of the defense, paying him almost $1.4 million a year. We're clearly showing that Mike Gundy is willing to adapt and overcome obstacles. So it's going to be a pretty exciting season nonetheless. Oklahoma State and Utah, they have done things very similarly over the course of Whittingham and Mike Gundy's careers. So I feel like it's natural that we draw these parallels and we pay attention to what Oklahoma State and Utah do because of the hype coming into the season, because of the cachet that Mike Gundy and Kyle Whittingham draw. There is going to be a desire to feature Oklahoma State and Utah if we're living up to expectations to help with that. It's not just going to be about Deion Sanders. Now you have Kenny Dillingham that is obviously grabbing eyeballs. Lance Leipold's a big name. Chris Kleiman can still do the daggone thing. Willie Fritz is still proven to be a motivational individual who can change programs. So we have that good mixture of old school coaches and some new guys coming in. But it's imperative that you have some flag bearers of the conference. I understand that the bipolar nature of the Big 12, it's good for viewership from a casual fan's perspective, but I do also wonder if not ever having a flag bearer, borderline blue blood, can eventually hurt this league. One of us has to be that.
One of us does. And I feel likely, as I kind of mentioned, Cody, I feel like from a consistent standpoint, as much as I hate to say it, I feel like BYU, and obviously I don't hate it as much, but I'd rather be Utah, and Texas Tech are the two schools positioned most to be the teams that are most consistently towards the top, simply because they have the best NIL resources, and that is what is going to allow you to get the most premier talent. That doesn't mean Oklahoma State and Utah can't break through, can't beat those teams any given year, but if you're just talking overall consistency with how rosters are being built, it's hard for me not to see not to see BYU and Tech being among those two. And why I'm not throwing Colorado in there is the whole reason I brought this up originally was this list is the first 25 years of the 2000s. I don't see Deion staying at Colorado another 10 years. So I'm not putting the Buffs in this conversation. What other schools do you look at outside of Utah and OSU being a chance to bounce up? Or I should just say, what schools do you look at most likely to be at the top of this conference moving forward?
Well, I think you mentioned BYU and Texas Tech have obviously positioned themselves in a money-driven world. Whenever you have the ability to publicly release that you're spending millions and millions of dollars, it is going to be very alluring to potential recruits and transfers if you win, right? Nobody's going to want to go to Texas Tech if they continue to have lackluster seasons. I think another brand that it would be big for the Big 12 if they found the ability to kind of continue to climb would be KU. Right, Kansas State is going to be a natural team that could be a flag bearer, but KU is doing something that's very appealing. They're doing it in baseball. They're obviously always been a basketball school. They're coming up in football. Financially, they have as much money as the BYUs and the Texas Techs. They've just never had a reason to spend it. And now that you're seeing them have reasons to spend it, you're seeing almost every sport in Lawrence kind of take a massive uptick. So to have a team go from the very bottom to continue to rise in multiple sports, I think he is good for the viability of the conference.
I absolutely agree with that. And there's the Iowa States of the world that also could have a chance to do that and be one of the powerhouses moving forward. It's going to be interesting to see. We're going to talk about the Big 12 title game in a moment, but Cody, you and I have something in common. We had a starter or projected starter at one point, key contributor, I'll say, at one point in this offseason who seemed like they were going to stay at Utah and it ended up at BYU. In fact, it's kind of funny. It ended up being both defensive tackle. I'm curious from your perspective. Utah fans were obviously very fired up, and there were some reports about some things going on, even as of lately, even what BYU was trying to do with some Utah players to have Utah fans riled up. How did you feel about Justin Kirkland going from Oklahoma State to BYU?
I didn't have a problem with it. But I mean, I'm
really
close to the situation. Well, because me and Kirkland have been pretty close for a couple of years, right? So we were talking on a regular basis, and we had several conversations outside of the football facilities. And so I had a very good understanding of what his thoughts were on the team and the new staff. And I will admit, he absolutely loved it. Like, he was raving about this coaching staff from a technical fundamental standpoint is doing 10 times more than the last two staffs put together, essentially. And so he was very excited. But the only caveat to that is he is kind of homesick. And when there is a lot of turmoil going on at a university and you're replacing 17 coaches, you're having a new system. And then after spring, you're being told that there's still some things that are going to change. There's still a big group of guys that we're trying to bring in. There's just so much insecurity in regards to roster spots, that when you have a team from back home that has been asking, he grew up in Utah. He's got players or friends that play for both BYU and Utah. So players from both universities have been telling him for a year and a half, hey, you should come back home. And if things would have continued to be great at Stillwater, he would have never entertained that idea. But because of the inconsistencies and the fact that we are being pretty open that we're not giving returning players very much money at all, we're spending all of our money on getting guys out of the portal. And after a 3-9 season, it's kind of hard to combat that. But I wasn't mad about it because I had a feeling, right, when certain things kind of took place, that he was going to continue to be more homesick, because I knew he was homesick before that. But he liked the new direction, liked the new staff, liked all the NFL coaches being brought in, liked the fundamental teaching that was happening. But at the end of the day, when you have all of these external factors and you always have that nudging to go back home, it does make sense. So I wasn't up in arms about it, but
you
obviously had more insight than most.
You hit the nail on the head for why I think each of these cases are different. And we cannot claim that anytime any school, albeit, lands a player, we can't just shout tampering. And with Utah's, the reason there was some frustration with a lot of the Utah stuff is that's what was being reported. And you looked at what happened and you're like, okay, you have guys on Utah's roster like that aren't in the portal. And all of a sudden there's these things that are happening by sources we trust to. And that's what leads us to, tampering.
Yeah.
But you just laid out why Kirkland was so different. So that's why I just feel like in general, it's a dangerous thing when we just throw everything under the same umbrella when it's not. It's more, there's just more that goes on behind the scenes. One thing that we hope goes on in the biggest scene, or did you want to add one more thing there, Cody?
No. That's people just need to pay attention when you talk about tampering.
Yeah.
Tread lightly when the dude is from the school supposedly doing the tampering. It would just be like, we just brought in Taj McCoy from Colorado because he's from Oklahoma and he grew up an hour away from the stadium. Was there tampering involved, or did he just miss his family and want to be back home? He started several games at Colorado as a true freshman, so it wasn't playing time. It wasn't NIL. It was just a factor of being homesick. So, yeah, when there's tampering and a guy lives 3,000 miles away, maybe that's a more viable, legitimate conversation. But if a dude's from there, maybe check where he went to high school and where he grew up before we start throwing tampering around.
Yeah, that's the difference between Kirkland and a lot of the Utah guys, in my opinion. But either way, Utah, BYU, Oklahoma State, everyone's trying to reach the Big 12 title game. Utah has aspirations of doing that, and we've not been shouting it from the rooftops like last year, which I do think last year was different. But I do feel like Utah has the pieces that they could get there. They do not deserve to be one of the favorites, in my opinion, but I do believe this is a Utah roster that shut up a lot of their holes, and I do think there's a chance they could reach the title game this season. Heck, I like this Utah team a lot more than I liked ASU going into last season. Does Oklahoma State have those same aspirations, and do you feel like they could match it if so?
Well, yeah, we have those aspirations, but we have no idea what the team's going to look like, right? Could the former five-star All-Americans, Shanavian Bradley, J.K. Johnson, could they look like they did coming into college when they were, originally set to start at Tennessee or Ohio State? Do we get that freshman version of them, or do we get the next year version of them where they battled injuries and they were on and off the field? Right, that's going to be part of the question. We don't know what we're getting. What we do know is that we have an NFL predicated system now. We have coaches that play 0 games. They give 0 craps about whether you're returning, whether you're coming in the portal, whether you're getting a lot of money, 0 money. They don't care. And from that aspect, you have to be excited. The issue with Oklahoma State this previous season was what I thought was going to be a positive, having coaches for 17, 19, 21 years, ended up being a negative because that equaled complacency. The only downside to have coaches that have made entire careers here is, and especially when you have 36 upperclassmen, obviously you can have the tendency to kind of relax a little bit as a coach because you think the seniors are going to conduct everything, and it wasn't happening, right? So the checks and balances did not exist in Stillwater this previous season. Now it does, and the coaches don't really care who you are, where you came from. They're just going to play the best players, and for that reason, it's very, very exciting. But we don't have a quarterback that's thrown a pass in college football. We don't have a running back that's led a team in more than a couple of years. We're pretty unproven at wide receiver, right? Our best wide receiver coming into the season, Talon Shetron, he's already out for the year. The defensive side of the ball, it's all brand new. So do we have an expectation to get back on the top of the seat? Yes, we do. And Mike Gundy doesn't typically perform in years that he's supposed to be great. It's the years that Mike Gundy's underestimated that he typically competes for a Big 12 title. And lastly, I will admit, I'm happy. Okay. I'm not happy about a 3-9 season, but we did get rid of the coordinators that were clearly an issue. So that's a plus, right? We're spending more money in NIL than we ever thought physically possible. That's a plus. We're getting talent to Stillwater, Oklahoma that used to never even think about coming to Stillwater. That's a plus. But at the end of the day, it's going to be pretty intriguing to see what it looks like, because you do have to have a response season. And I'm here to make money, buddy. What is y'all's over and under?
Ooh, I think we're 7.5. I want to say, and I think we're over. I think we're going to win more than that. I do. I think there will be a lot. There's a lot of good games that I go back and forth on. What's Oklahoma State's? Courtesy of our friends.
5.5 on FanDuel. I don't know what it is for Utah, but I can tell you, if there is a benefit to Mike Gundy pooping down his one leg and peeing down the other through an entire season, it is the fact that we get to make money. Dude, for us to win the Big 12 title, it's like plus 5,000, right? So $100 bet is ridiculous money, and it's the same can be said whether you look at the two different services. There's so many money opportunities for Oklahoma State this year. That has me excited.
Yeah, and then we'll see. It'll be interesting to see if both these teams have the chances to capitalize on something special and make it all the way. This conference is crazy and unpredictable. Cody, last thing I'll just say, the only thing I wish that Utah and Oklahoma State continue to play each other. I felt like we built a fun rivalry last year because of those preseason expectations. I wish the Big 12 as a conference, I know they have their weird scheduling lexicon, whatever it is. I wish they had identified two teams that had not been rivals in the past and tried to make sure, hey, let's continue to play them. And maybe Utah will do that with Baylor, and that can eventually become it. But when you build a rivalry outside of your main rivalry, it comes from frequent matchups that have history. Like last year, Utah, crazy Isaac Wilson game, Oklahoma State, disappointment. Like, you guys would love to get your lick back in on Utah. You can't do that this year, unfortunately. I wish that we were playing each other again this year. I think it was a fun rivalry last year. And we've talked about so many times the similarities between our two programs. I think we're natural rivals.
Yeah, I think if there's anything Brett Yormark has done thus far that I haven't thought was a very advantageous route to future success in the Big 12 is missing out on rivalries. Because coming into it, the most natural rival for us was Texas Tech. Yet the first year, they didn't schedule us versus Tech, but they did give us versus Utah. And obviously, you know, that carried a lot of storylines coming into the season, coming into that particular matchup. And they didn't take advantage of it this season. So I do feel like if there's one thing that Brett Yormark is clearly missing the mark on, it's not fostering new rivalries and making them an integral part of the schedules moving forward. Because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Farmageddon even goes away in like 2027 or something like that, which I thought was absolutely insane. Because outside of the Holy War, the only thing you really have is Farmageddon. So to not make that an every single year game is an issue. And I do hope that is something that Brett Yormark does do better in the future. Find the teams that have the most hatred or the most similarities and make sure that they play every single year. Because missing out on rivalry weekend is a problem in my personal opinion.
Totally agree. Utah played UCF last year. I know you guys played Colorado, and if you guys had been like where the expectations maybe were supposed to be, maybe that's a little more intriguing. But yeah, it's not much of a flavor and a flair, and hopefully it's something that the Big 12 can figure out moving forward. Either way, Cody, I look forward to the next time we play Oklahoma State and can beat some Cowboy. But just like I always look forward to coming on and recording these with you, my friend. Always a blast. Thanks, Cody.
Absolutely, buddy, man.
That's going to do it for today's Locked On Utes and Locked On Oklahoma State. Make sure you keep watching both of our feeds as we'll continue to drop the latest content covering Utah and Oklahoma State. We hope you have a great rest of your day.